Handerson has played a very dirty role. Ever since he came to Bahrain in 1966, he embarked upon an era of terror, and thousands of people were arrested, arbitrarily arrested and tortured under his command until he retired 2 or 3 years ago. He was the strong man behind the whole repressive machine in Bahrain.
He was the man who was in charge of this whole operation during these years when thousands of Bahrainis passed through the security system, and I can say safely that hundreds of them at least underwent torture.
Terrible experience is when they opened the door which led to another office and another officer room, and I can hear the screaming of one of my friends there, and usually that guy was hanged longer than me on the stake, so I can feel what I'm coming to, what type of pain I'm awaiting.
You know, I've been to Bahrain, I've been to Manama, the capital, I've seen the Interior Ministry. We're talking about a structure that's, the building itself is not much bigger than this building whose roof we're standing on. The idea that somehow he didn't know what was going on down the hall it's just not credible.
They started to torture me, and whenever I asked them why, what do you want, I'll tell you. To stop this torture, for example, they'll say no, we just want to torture you first in order to save our time later on when we start asking you the serious questions.
They picked upon people who spoke out against government policies, who were critics of the government, who, you know, in some cases people who wanted to overthrow the government. I mean, people, some of whom were not particularly nice people, but you know, they didn't deserve to be tortured.
At the very least, it would appear that Ian Henderson, George Medal winner, deserves to be questioned about those allegations of torture. But those questions have yet to be asked. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, the allegations against Ian Henderson's feared Bahraini security services were monitored by international human rights organizations.
Redress has a mandate specifically to look into acts of torture and to assist victims of torture in obtaining reparation. Redress was approached by Bahraini victims on this matter, and we chose to look into it. The allegations against Ian Henderson are extremely serious in that during the time where he was head of the SIS, it is alleged that serious and continued acts of torture were perpetrated on a regular basis. As the commander or the person responsible of this unit, Mr. Henderson would be responsible under law for any acts which occurred within this jurisdiction.
During the 90s, when torture, particularly during 94 and 98, was systematic in the country, we were able to document most of the allegations of torture. And during that period, there were also at least 7 people that died under interrogation in custody of the intelligence services. So throughout this period, Ian Henderson was at the head of the intelligence services.
The international justice community has been aware of these allegations for at least 10 years. We know that in '95, the European Parliament made a very specific statement in respect of this case, asking that Mr. Henderson be forced to leave Bahrain at that time.
The United Kingdom has very clear legal obligations under international law with regard to torture. In this respect, the most important obligation is to ensure that your own nationals that are accused of having been involved in torture are brought to justice in your own courts. Most important treaty in this regard is the UN Convention Against Torture, which provides for alleged torturer anywhere in the world to be brought to justice regardless of where they committed their crime, or their nationality, or the nationality of the victim. Both the United Kingdom and Bahrain are state parties to this treaty.
Yet, despite such obligations and despite knowledge of Ian Henderson's whereabouts, no steps have been taken to detain or question the man whose name many Bahrainis believe has become synonymous with evil. To his enemies, this address on Dartmoor has been a closely kept secret. Villagers, too, have learned little about their very private neighbour who plays no part in the close-knit local community. Yet the Home Office and the police have known who lives behind these gates for years. For the last 30 years, Ian Henderson has been free to come and go as he pleases. Year by year, his house at Holne has been improved, expanded, enlarged. Today, Stoke Shallows is administered by Harbin Securities, a faceless offshore company registered in the Virgin Islands. Neither the house nor Ian Henderson himself is on the local electoral register. Yet, while he may adopt a low profile, the gravity of the allegations against him ensure that interest in his past and his future is unlikely to diminish.
We have legislation on our statute book criminalising acts of torture wherever they may be committed in the world. We're signatories of the Convention Against Torture, and therefore we're obliged to apprehend people who commit torture when they step onto our soil and come within our jurisdiction. And so what we ought to be doing is to collect the evidence, submit it to the Crown Prosecution Service, and if they say there's a case to bring in court, then the Attorney General would give consent to the prosecution, and when Mr. Henderson sets foot in this country, which he does from time to time because he has an estate in the West Country, he should be arrested and brought before the courts.
All of which begs that single question. Why does Ian Henderson, alleged torturer, appear to enjoy immunity from British prosecution? The answer perhaps may not lie with Ian Henderson at all. For 40 years, Britain and her American ally have befriended the Bahraini government, and not just with words.
Bahrain is strategically very important to the West. It's positioned in the Gulf region, which is of the highest strategic importance given its domination of the oil industry and the threat from instability in the region. Although Bahrain's not a major oil producer itself, it is the banking and insurance hub for the region. More importantly, though, Bahrain hosts the US Navy's Fifth Fleet, which is crucial for American strategic interests in the Gulf.
It's not just strategically important, but also is a key customer for Western hardware, particularly American military hardware, such as F-16 jets, Apache helicopters, etc. Bahrain has been one of the few places in the Middle East that have been able to keep a toehold through instances like keeping leverage over the internal state security systems, or through perpetuating arms sales, even after British control of Bahrain ended in 1971.
Britain sold a large number of arms to Bahrain at that time that were used for internal repression, and Britain is also a major investor in Bahrain and in the financial services industry in Bahrain, and I can only conclude that there are double standards in operation. We were very concerned about human rights in many countries of the world, except where there was a big British commercial influence.